So, I won't be talking about voice AI. I'll be talking about something else, turn server security, turn protocol security. Why? Well, when we talk about WebRTC security, we often focus on end-to-end encryption. But there is a critical component that is often overlooked, which is the turn server. While it's kind of just a relay, from a hacker's perspective, any public relay is a potential weapon. So I think that makes it interesting from a security perspective. So yeah, first I'll give a bit of background into my personal journey on turn security. Then we'll look at the threat model for turn, and we'll focus on real-world examples. And finally, for those who are running their own turn servers, we'll give some best practices, security best practices. So I'm Sandro Gauci from Enable Security, and we focus on voice over IP and WebRTC security, penetration testing, and security consultancy. So this topic is very much at the core of what we do every day. And I hope that after this talk, you'll have an understanding of the real-world risk of running a turn server. What are the ways that you can get compromised, your company can get compromised thanks to that. And then have an idea of what to do about it in terms of fixing these things. All right. So I'm going to start with a screenshot from probably the 90s or early 2000s. So in the 90s, we had lists of SOCs, proxies, SOCs version 4 and maybe 5 eventually, and HTTP proxies where hackers, we call them script kiddies back then, abused, misconfigured public proxies to relay their traffic. And this gave the impression that these hackers could commit crime, essentially, without being discovered by hiding their IP address. Some of these proxies were actually honeypots, but I won't go into that. But the thing is, this same concept of proxy abuse or relay abuse applies directly to turn servers today. So fast forward to 2016, still history in AI terms, for sure. But I'm looking at WebRTC. We had a client who, wanted us to pen test WebRTC platform, and WebRTC. When you look at the protocols, you see, okay, this has great security, but turn is described as a communication relay with user control, and this is very much like those 90s and proxies. It's a bit of a red flag. So when I saw this as a security guy, I'm thinking, wow, this is great because it opens up a lot of possibilities in terms of abuse. And that's what started kind of my love relationship with turn servers. And once we developed, there were no tools to test my assumptions. But once we developed the tools to abuse this kind of became one of the main security concerns and security issues that we kept finding consistently in WebRTC environments. It's not the only one, of course, but it's quite a standard thing. So let's skip to threat modeling. There's the threat modeling manifesto. If you're thinking about anything related to security and you want to assess the security of anything, it's good to look at this website, Threat Modeling Manifesto, and it asks a couple of questions. I'm going to focus on the fun one, which is number 2, what can go wrong? And there's these 3 things that I'm going to go into, because these are the most practical ones and the most realistic security risks you have. So, if turn is just a relay, what security does it actually provide? Well, the RFC is clear. Authentication is generally required, but things like encryption and integrity are handled by the WebRTC media itself, so that's not a concern. TERN is responsible for reliable delivery. So clearly denial of service is a concern there, but yeah, but that's it. And the first issue that I wanted to focus on is what we call TERN relay abuse. And yeah, what do we mean by abuse? In a WebRTC environment, TERN servers are meant to relay legitimate media traffic. So by abuse, what I mean is, instead of relaying just legitimate traffic, you're relaying traffic that is not legitimate. And this could be used to bypass firewalls, could be used to anonymize traffic, access internal network resources, and so on and so forth. None of these activities are what the server was designed for. And there's different ways to do that. For UDP, there's two main ways to send data to other peers through a TERN server. There's UDP send, channel, this channel method. And then TCP, it could also relay TCP as well. So you use TCP connect for that. And they all allow relaying to arbitrary destinations, arbitrary peers. And this flexibility is what enables the scenarios that I'll be discussing next. So the peer address could be anything, including internal addresses, local addresses, 127.0.0.1, and so on, as well as third-party external addresses. The natural solution is to have an access control mechanism. And this is already part of the protocol in CoTERN, which is the most well-known TERN server, most used, and other TERN servers as well, because it's by design. But hold on a minute. Well, we said it requires authentication, right, and authorization as well. That's true. WebRTC platforms, however, many of them kind of need to be open to the public so that anyone can register and have a meeting or invite someone, and they maybe join in even anonymously, relatively anonymously, if invited. So the TERN credentials, even if you have authentication, those credentials need to be dispensed to anyone. And therefore, the result is that authentication does not really provide any effective protection in many cases. Now, we kept finding this in our penetration tests, but our pen tests are behind non-disclosure agreements, and we kind of got bored of not being able to publish this because it seemed like a big deal. We wanted to boast a bit, I guess. So we looked at the bug bounties, and Slack had a very interesting bug bounty. They allowed us to publish our work. So we decided to go for Slack. And what we did was, this was our methodology, how we abused this issue. First, you get the TERN credentials as a legitimate user. You try to make a call, and you see your web browser go and access an API endpoint that gets the TERN credentials. Then we pass those credentials to our tool, which starts an HTTP proxy locally or a SOX proxy locally, and then passes all the traffic through the TERN server that you have configured and with those credentials. So how did we get from this, which is the temporary credentials that you used to get from Slack, they no longer have this, to something like this, which is, maybe the guys in the back might not be able to see, but this is a metadata service on AWS, on this Slack environment, Slack network, that would give you, for example, a secret access key, which could lead to some problems in terms of security. I have a quick historic demo recorded, where, we're just triggering the call. This is very sped up. So I'm copy and pasting the credentials into a toml file and a config file that is passed to our tool. I'm not going to call the tool by its name because it's a very commonly used name. But it has nothing to do with the other stunner. And then this starts an HTTP proxy. I'm going to show, okay, first that's my IP of my home IP, 6, 7, 10 years ago. And if I refresh, it's passing through the proxy, which passes through the turn server. So it forwards everything to the turn server. And then you're accessing a local host node export thing. And then eventually the AWS metadata service on 169.254, 169.254. All right. So now that's, they fixed it, of course, ages ago, and they also changed the whole system since then. Anyway, more recently, like a month ago in August, at Black Hat in the US and DEF.CON, Adam Crosser published some research. And he showed how to use turn servers for C2 traffic. Now, C2 stands for command and control. It's a set of techniques and infrastructure that attackers use to communicate with and manage compromised systems within a target environment. Target environment meaning, a corporate environment. You have some, as an attacker, you have some compromised some machines inside, but they cannot communicate usually because some security, firewalls, whatever, block that traffic. And what he found out is that one way to get around that is to use turn servers from trusted services like Zoom and MS Teams, which looks like, the compromised machines are making a Zoom call during that short period of time where they communicate. So it's a great talk. You can watch it on YouTube, the DEF.CON talk. And Zoom's solution, I'm not sure how Microsoft fixed it, but Zoom's solution was to prevent peer-to-peer connections, which means, I think, that the turn only relays to and from media servers. That's a solution that might work in some cases. And finally, I wanted to mention that in the last 2-3 years, we've been using or abusing turn servers during our penetration tests as a trusted IP. And I'll explain it with some quick videos. So here we have SIP. You might have a CPaaS network, and it has both a SIP trunk and a turn server on the same network. And the attacker wants to make calls through a corporate PBX, for example. And the corporate PBX has IP whitelisting or IP authentication, which is not really authentication, in my opinion. But they are unable to from their IP, of course. It's not whitelisted. However, if the attacker were to somehow, be able to use the turn server, they could pass that traffic through the turn server, and if the IP or IP range, in many cases, is whitelisted, then they could make calls through the corporate PBX and possibly commit fraud, toll fraud, which could be hugely problematic. And we've been finding this. We need to publish a proper blog post about this, at least. But yeah, it's an interesting way to abuse turn relays. All right. Next topic is denial of service. Now, like any public service, turn servers could have denial of service risks, from resource exhaustion to bandwidth saturation, which is very hard to protect against. But there's also another unique threat where your turn server might become part of a participant in attacks against others that have nothing to do with your WebRTC environment or with your turn server, which is becoming part of an amplification attack. Now, when thinking about denial of service against your turn server, it's important to understand the scope, right? And to understand how much of your traffic is passing through a turn server. That's kind of your attack surface. So, don't forget your media servers, which are probably receiving 100% of your traffic. If you're thinking about this problem, start from there. But yeah, let's talk about reflection attacks, because attackers are actually abusing this in the wild. And the way it works is the attackers spoof the source IP address. And this is in general for amplification attacks. And they spoof the source IP address, the target server, it might be DNS, NTP, or even turn, in this case, that's what we're talking about, receives that request on UDP and sends a reply. And the reply goes to the spoofed IP address, which is actually the victim, right? And when they do this on scale, they get an amplification factor. Now, the amplification factor of DNS is you send a small packet and the response is like 50 to 70 times more. NTP also, but turn is just, the maximum is just 4 times. So whenever we looked at it in the past years, we're not interested in this personally as pen testers. But yeah, it's being abused, and these are 2 main ways to abuse it. And the thing is, in June, the core developer, Gustavo Garcia, for Coturn issued a blog post, and they did a major, a release which fixed or changed some of the behaviors of Coturn, disabled some things, and so on and so forth, so that the amplification factor goes down, and so that there's less abuse. And same with the Stunner turn server as well. The developers were also trying to shrink the response so that it no longer has an amplification factor. It could still be a problem, but it's better. The third issue that we want to talk about is software vulnerabilities, which affect, any software really. So turn servers are software too. Software has bugs, and vulnerabilities, so that hopefully get fixed. But yeah, Coturn, of course, has quite a history of security issues along the years. It's the oldest one. It's in a certain language that has a lot of potential for vulnerabilities. So yeah, the whole point is keep your servers patched to the latest version. Now we've seen how turn servers can be abused for relays, denial of service, and of course can have vulnerabilities, so they can lead to compromise. Let's bring it all together and walk through a security checklist to protect your systems if you decide to have to host your own turn servers. So firstly, I think it's important to isolate the turn server to its own network or security group, so that if someone uses the relay to reach other systems, they can only reach the turn server itself, at most. And access control rules, of course. You could also possibly, not always, of course, but you could also possibly allow traffic to just your media servers. Could be an effective approach. I'm sure that not only Zoom do this. We have found this in other places, I think. And then you do protocol hardening. You disable things that are no longer maybe necessary or not necessary for your needs in particular. You could disable UDP listening, actually, because amplification attacks rely on UDP. You could sometimes. On the other hand, you could disable TCP peer relaying. So on the other side, which would protect against what I was doing with Slack, which is relaying HTTP requests which require TCP and not UDP peer. And rate limiting, it's useful in any software, any server software. It could help you prevent denial of service. You could sometimes protect the credentials. Before I said that you often need to dispense, temporary credentials to anyone, but that's not necessarily the case. There are cases where you have a turn server only for one organization, so you don't have to have no authentication on your turn credentials API endpoint. You could have authentication there and keep them up to date, like I said before, and monitor traffic and servers for incidents and attacks. Of course, that if you log too much, you could introduce denial of service. So it's, watch out how you do that, but I think it's important to be able to trace back attacks. Concluding, so I would like to thank Alfred, my colleague, who built the tools and did a lot of the work behind this presentation, and the people at Software Mention for this conference. It's been really a great event, and our customers, because they give us very interesting work to do, penetration tests, and anyone who's contributing to RTC security. There's not many, but some of them are in this room, so thank you very much. Key takeaways. Their servers are powerful proxies in a way. Don't just think of them as a simple media relay. They can relay more than just that. They can become weapons against other systems, so keep that in mind. Seems to be a real problem, actually. And so the solutions involve mainly three things, I would guess: isolation, restriction, and keeping them up to date. What to do? One thing is to stay informed. We publish a newsletter every month on WebRTC and voice over IP security. So that's one way, and another way is, of course, if you don't test your solutions, your real-time solutions, then you don't know what security issues you have until maybe it's too late. So test, and test. This is how you get in touch. And if you want to scan our QR code for the newsletter, that's the newsletter subscription page. Thank you.
Anyone has more curiosity about security stuff? Chris, in the back.
Are we live? Yes.
Hey, great talk, Sandro. Thanks for sharing the details of how you can exploit turn servers. But you mentioned the bug bounty program that Slack had, and you used that to actually kind of fund the efforts. This is kind of maybe a philosophical question, but do you think these things are effective, especially when you've got like players like Meta who did like the Facebook pixel of like contacting a local server on the phone, which is actually running WebRTC, and like, is it the what is the wolf guarding the hen house kind of situation? I'm just curious what your thoughts are on this.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't really fund the effort through. I mean, we got like 3K or something like that. It's for us, bug bounties are not worth it from a monetary point of view. Okay, so whenever we did bug bounties, it was more whenever we could publish, essentially, or at least get in touch with the vendors when we don't have contact already with them, if they're not our clients, essentially. Now, the topic of bug bounties, how effective they are, there's pros and cons. You get when you start a bug bounty, as a vendor, you get a lot of feedback from possibly AI-generated reports and so on nowadays. So yeah, it's a long topic. I think we can talk about this during the, the lunch break.
Any other questions? Gentleman here in the front.
Thank you for the presentation. It's amazing. But I have a question. What kind of security controls do you actually suggest to at least mitigate some of the problems with RTC or turn servers?
Yeah, I mean, one would probably follow the last 4 or 5 slides.
I checked the authorization authentication, but how do you actually put it behind a WAF? Would you compromise the performance by using
No.
VPN or IPsec? Would
No.
you compromise?
It depends on the case, right? But web application firewalls don't understand stun or turn. So no, that's not the solution. You know, that's why I didn't even mention any WAF or firewall or anything like that here. I mentioned turn software specific solutions because, you know, that's, in my opinion, now people differ, but in my opinion, that's where you have the problems, and that's where you should be fixing. That's my personal opinion. And also, the firewalls or web application firewalls don't really understand these protocols.
Okay. Dan in the back. And I did hear that there is a chat question. Let me see.
Have you ever gone after one of the turn platforms, such as Cloudflare or Twilio, or can you not talk about it?
Not yet.
All right. Also, guests at the chat, they asked, does adopting an SFU architecture remove the need for turn relays for NAT firewall traversal and eliminate the security concerns associated with peer-to-peer WebRTC mesh deployments? If not, what risks remain and what best practices should be applied?
I think I need to read this one. SFUs, I've seen plenty of cases where turn is not necessary, it seems. If SFUs are, you know, solving that problem, creating others, I suppose. But yeah, we've seen some cases where peer-to-peer WebRTC is used, but in most cases, we haven't, you know, seen it used that much. So yeah, it's. What was the second question?
Very good question.
Probably.
I guess it was one long one, and I guess that the answer has been already given. So let's wrap it up with a round of applause for Sandro.
Thank you.